There's frost forming on the inside of my window right now, feathering across the glass in patterns that look almost gentle until you remember what they mean. The thermometer nailed to the post outside my door read 40 below when I checked it an hour ago, and it hasn't warmed a degree since. That's the kind of cold that doesn't feel like weather anymore. It feels like a presence, like something with intent. And I want to tell you tonight about what that cold does to a man, because I've felt it start its work on me more than once, and I've watched it finish its work on others. Here's the thing that ought to stop you cold, and I mean that plain. The freezing itself, the actual ice in the flesh dying that everybody pictures when they think of 40 below, that isn't what puts most men in the ground out here. The warmth does. The feeling of getting warm, that sweet, drowsy heat that floods over a freezing man near the end, has killed more people in the deep cold than the frost on its own ever managed. I know how backward that sounds. A man dying of cold, and the thing that kills him is the sensation of warmth. Stay with me, because once you understand this, you'll never trust your own body's word on a cold night again. Cold doesn't kill you the way you think it does. It doesn't come at you like a wall. It comes at you like a thief working through a house room by room, shutting off the lights one at a time. And the cruelest part is that it shuts off the room that would tell you what's happening near the very end. That's the riddle I want you to hold on to through everything I'm about to tell you. How a freezing man burns. How a man dying of cold in his last clear minutes tears his own coat off and lies down in the snow certain he's too hot. I'm going to explain exactly how that happens, but not yet. Keep it in the back of your mind, because it's the whole spine of this, and everything else only makes sense once you see it. Let me tell you who I am first, so you understand I'm not reading this off a chart somewhere. I've wintered in country where 40 below is just a Tuesday, where the cold sits down on the land in October and doesn't get up again until May. I've had my own body start down this road, felt the shivering stop when it had no business stopping, felt the strange calm come over me, and only had the sense to be terrified because an old man had told me years before exactly what that calm meant. That knowing saved my legs, maybe my life. The men who taught me this didn't learn it from a book either. They learned it burying partners, hauling stiff bodies out of trap lines, finding men frozen half undressed, with their gear scattered around them like they'd gone mad. And in a way, they had. That's what the cold does. It makes you mad right at the end, and it makes the madness feel like relief. The first 20 minutes. That's what I want to walk you through tonight, because that's the window where everything is decided. Not the first hour, not the first night. The first 20 minutes at 40 below, when a man is exposed and unprepared, is the whole story. And most folks have no idea how fast that clock runs. They think cold is slow. They think you've got time. They picture a long, dramatic struggle. The truth is that at 40 below, your body starts making decisions for you inside of 2 minutes. And by 20, if you've done nothing right, the decisions it's making are the ones that end you. Let me set the scene the way it actually happens. A man steps out of a warm truck or a warm cabin. Maybe he's only going a short way. Maybe the snowmobile quit, or he took a wrong turn, or he just went out to get wood and the door blew shut behind him. He's not dressed for a long stay because he never planned on one. Nobody plans on one. And that's the first thing the old hands understood that the rest of us forget. The cold doesn't wait for you to be ready. It starts the second the warm air leaves your skin. The very first minute, your body does something clever, and it's this cleverness that fools people into thinking they've got more time than they do. Your blood vessels near the surface of your skin clamp down tight. This is called vasoconstriction, and it's an old survival trick written deep in your flesh from before you were ever a man at all. Your body is pulling its heat inward, away from the skin, away from the fingers and the toes and the ears and the nose, hoarding it around the core where your heart and your lungs and your liver are doing the work that keeps you alive. Your body has made a decision already, and the decision is brutal and correct. It has decided that your hands are expendable and your heart is not. It will let your fingers die to save your chest. So in that first minute or two, your extremities start going numb. And here's the trap. The numbness feels almost like relief. The sharp, biting pain of the first blast of cold fades. And a man thinks, well, I'm getting used to it. He is not getting used to it. His body has simply stopped sending blood to the parts that were screaming because it's decided those parts aren't worth the heat. That fading of the pain is not adjustment. It's abandonment. Your body is triaging you, and it's leaving your fingers behind on the field. Now the shivering starts. And this is your body's second big move. Shivering is nothing but your muscles firing over and over, fast and useless, burning fuel to make heat. It's a furnace kicking on. A hard shiver can throw off several times the heat your body makes at rest. And in these first minutes, it's the main thing standing between you and the cold. So when a man is shivering violently, teeth rattling, whole body shaking, that man is actually doing well. I want you to hear that clearly because it runs against instinct. The shivering man is the winning man. His body is still fighting, still spending fuel, still keeping the core warm. The shivering is a good sign. It's the roar of the furnace. It's when the shivering stops that you should be afraid. And I'll come back to that because it ties straight into the riddle I planted. By the 5th minute at 40 below, if the wind is moving at all, the picture gets uglier fast. Wind is the multiplier that nobody respects enough. Still air at 40 below is deadly. Air moving at 20 miles an hour at 40 below will take exposed flesh in a matter of minutes. The wind strips away that thin layer of slightly warmer air your body manages to hold against your skin, and it does it faster than your body can rebuild it. A man who'd have an hour in still cold might have 15 minutes in wind, and he won't feel the difference until it's already inside him. This is why the old-timers feared the wind more than the temperature. A number on a thermometer is one thing. Wind turns that number into a knife. Around this same time, your breathing changes, and this is a small thing that costs a man dearly. Air at 40 below is bone dry because cold air can't hold moisture. Every breath you pull in has to be warmed and moistened by your own body before your lungs can use it. And every breath you push out carries that heat and that water away from you. You're bleeding warmth and water out through your own mouth with every breath. And the harder you work, the harder you breathe, and the faster you bleed. This is the first place where the counterintuitive core of survival starts to show itself. Because a man's instinct in the cold is to move hard, to run, to fight, to generate heat through effort. And moving hard makes you breathe hard. And breathing hard empties you out faster. I'll build on that because it becomes one of the layers of the fix. Now here's a piece almost nobody thinks about until it's happening to them. Sweat. You would swear that sweat has no place in a story about 40 below. But sweat kills men in the deep cold more often than you'd ever believe. A man exerts himself, hauling, walking, panicking, and he begins to sweat under all his layers. And that sweat soaks into his clothing, into the very insulation that's keeping him alive. Wet clothing loses most of its warming power. It stops holding air and starts holding cold water against the skin. And that water pulls heat out of a body far faster than dry air ever could. So a man who overheats himself in the first 10 minutes has just poisoned his own armor. He's turned his coat into a wet rag. And this is one of the deepest secrets of cold country, one the newcomers never learned and the old people lived by. You do not let yourself sweat in the cold. You'd rather be a little chilled and dry than warm and wet, because dry chilled you can fix, and wet cold will finish you. So there we are, somewhere between the 5th and 10th minute. The blood's been pulled from the extremities, the shivering's running full, the wind's stripping heat off the body. The breath is carrying warmth away. And if the man's been fighting hard, he's wet under his clothes and doesn't know it yet. Every one of these things is quiet. Not one of them announces itself. The man in the middle of this often feels like he's handling it. He feels tough. He feels like he's coping. And that feeling of coping is the most dangerous feeling a man can have out here, because it's built on a body that's already spending down the last of its reserves and hiding the bill from him. I want to stop here and hand you the fix, because I'd rather you have the tool before I finish scaring you with the wound. And I'll hand it to you the way it was handed to me, in layers, because dumping it all at once robs it of its weight. The fix costs nothing. That's what I love about it. It's not gear, it's not a fancy jacket, it's not some $10,000 expedition suit. It's knowing, and it's the part of the knowing that people throw away because it sounds too simple to matter. The first layer flips your whole head around, and it's this. In the cold, you protect your core before you protect your comfort. And those two things are not the same. Nearly everybody gets this backward. A cold man's instinct is to warm the part that hurts. His hands hurt, so he wants to warm his hands. His face stings, so he covers his face. But your body already made that decision for you back in the first minute. And it decided the core comes first. So you work with your body, not against it. You wrap the trunk. You cover the neck and the head and the chest, because that's where your heat lives, and that's where you lose it fastest, through the big vessels running close to the surface at your neck. A man will stand there rubbing his freezing fingers, while his bare neck bleeds heat into the wind. Cover the core, cover the neck, and your fingers get their blood back on their own once the body feels its center is safe. Warmth flows out from the middle. You defend the middle first. I'll give you the second layer in a moment, but hold on to the first, because it's the one that goes against every instinct in your hands. The second layer is the one modern people discard without a second thought, and it's this. The air is the insulation, not the fabric. People buy a coat and they think the coat is what's warm. The coat isn't warm. Nothing you own is warm. The only warmth out here is the heat your own body makes. And the only thing any coat does is trap a layer of still air against you long enough for your body to warm it. That's the entire trick of every good piece of cold weather clothing that's ever existed. It holds still air. Which means the thing that matters most isn't how thick your coat is, it's how much dead air you can trap and keep from moving. And that's why layers beat one big heavy garment every single time. 3 loose layers trap more still air between them than one thick one ever could. And they let you open up and vent before you sweat, then close down again when you cool. The old people dressed in layers of loose wool and fur with air spaces built right in, and they'd shed a layer the moment they started to warm up from work, and pull it back on the moment they stopped. They understood their clothing was just a way of managing air and sweat, and modern folk have forgotten this entirely, buying one expensive shell and wondering why they're freezing inside it. The third layer feels almost like cheating once you learn it, and I'll give it to you plainly. You breathe through cloth, and you warm your air before it hits your lungs. Take a scarf, a wool wrap, even a loose fold of your own collar, and pull it up over your mouth and nose so every breath you draw passes through fabric first. What happens is this. The warm, wet air you breathe out leaves a little of its heat and a little of its moisture in the cloth, and the next breath you draw in picks that warmth and moisture back up before it reaches your lungs. You're catching your own breath and using it twice. It sounds like a small thing, but I told you earlier how much a man bleeds out through his breathing at 40 below. And this closes off a good part of that bleed. It also keeps that knife-cold air from stunning your lungs. Once a man learns this, he wonders how he ever went without it, because it costs nothing and it works the instant you do it. The fourth layer is the one that sounds like madness. The one that clicks only after you've turned it over a few times. and here it is. When you're cold and in trouble, you move less, not more. I'll say it again because everything in you fights it. When the cold has hold of you, the answer is very often to do less of the obvious thing, which is to run and thrash and fight for warmth through hard motion. I told you already that hard effort empties you out. It makes you breathe hard and bleed heat through your breath. And worse, it makes you sweat and soak your insulation. A man who panics and runs and flails is a man spending his fuel recklessly and wetting his armor at the same time. The right move, more often than you'd think, is to stop, to get out of the wind, to build a small shelter or dig into snow, which insulates far better than people believe, and to conserve, to sit still and let your trapped air do its work. The panicked moving man dies faster than the still calm man. That's the madness of it, and it's true. Doing less of the obvious thing is the whole art of the cold. Now let me come back around to that riddle I asked you to hold, how a freezing man burns. Because now you're ready for the answer, and once you see it, everything locks into place. I told you the shivering is a good sign, that the shivering man is the winning man, because his furnace is roaring. Now here's what happens when the fight starts to be lost. As the core temperature keeps dropping, past a certain point, your body can no longer afford the fuel the shivering costs. And worse, the muscles themselves get too cold to keep firing right. So the shivering slows. Then it stops. And a man in this state, if he could think clearly, would understand this as the terrible sign it is. But he can't think clearly, because the cold has by now reached the one room in the house it saves for last, the brain. When the brain begins to cool, it stops working right. And it stops working right in a very particular and very cruel way. Judgment goes first. A cold-addled man makes bad decisions and feels perfectly confident in them. He gets clumsy, fumbling, slow. His speech slurs like a drunk man's. And then comes the thing that ties the whole riddle together. The thing the old accounts describe again and again with a kind of horror. The dying man feels hot. It's called paradoxical undressing, and it is one of the strangest and most reliably documented things about death by cold. In the final stage, a large share of people found frozen are found with their clothing removed. Coats thrown off, shirts unbuttoned, sometimes stripped nearly bare in the snow. For a long time this made no sense, and searchers sometimes suspected foul play. But here's what happens. Remember how your body clamped down all those surface blood vessels in the first minute to hoard heat in the core? As the brain fails and the deep body cools past the point of control, those clamped down vessels suddenly give way and relax all at once. A flood of blood rushes back out to the surface, to the skin, and that surge of warm blood hitting the cold skin creates a powerful, overwhelming sensation of heat. A burning. The freezing man, in the last confused minutes of his life, feels like he's roasting. And so, reasonably, in the broken logic of a dying brain, he takes off his coat. He tears at his shirt. He lies down to cool off. And that is how a freezing man burns. That is how a man dying of cold, certain he's too hot, undresses himself in the snow and speeds his own end. The warmth that kills him was never real. It was the last lie the cold tells. And by the time he feels it, the part of him that could have known better has already gone dark. That's the whole of the core claim I opened with. The feeling of warmth kills more men in the deep cold than the frost does on its own. Because the frost by itself is slow and honest. But the false warmth arrives right at the end, wearing the face of relief, and a man welcomes his own death, thinking it's rescue. The cold's masterstroke isn't the pain. It's the peace it offers at the finish. That drowsy, warm, sleepy calm that steals over a freezing man and tells him everything is fine now. He can rest now. He can lie down now. Every instinct that's kept a scared man fighting gets switched off. Gently, and replaced with the sweetest lie the body knows how to tell. Now sit with this next part, because it tells you who really understood this country and who only borrowed the surface of it. The northern peoples, the ones who lived in this killing cold for thousands of winters running. They hardly ever died this way, because they built their whole way of living around the truths I've just handed you. They dressed in layers of fur and skin with the air spaces built in. They moved deliberately and never let themselves sweat, working in a slow, steady rhythm and shedding layers before the heat could soak them. They built snow shelters that trapped warmth astonishingly well, because they understood that still air and stillness were their allies, not motion. And above all, they respected the cold as a thinking enemy, never a dumb one. They didn't fight it with effort. They outlasted it with knowing. The ones who died were the newcomers, the explorers and the miners and the trappers and the soldiers who came into cold country and copied the surface of survival without the substance. They wore the fur but didn't understand the air. They ran when they should have stilled. They sweated through their clothes and froze in their own moisture. They fought the cold like a wall to be broken through, when the people who'd lived there forever knew it was a current to be worked with. That one missing piece of knowing, the difference between fighting the cold and understanding it, is the whole space between the man who walks home in spring and the man they find in the melt. And I won't skip the hard fact that proves I'm not spinning you a campfire tale. During the Second World War, the United States military studied cold injury and cold death with grim thoroughness, because they were losing men to it. And they put down in hard writing the stages of what they came to call cold exposure. The medical literature that came out of that era and the decades after documented the shivering, the confusion, the loss of judgment, and yes, paradoxical undressing. All of it cataloged from real cases, real bodies, real recovered men, and real lost ones. This isn't old wives' talk. Hypothermia was mapped out stage by physicians studying men who lived it and men who didn't. And the phenomenon of the freezing man stripping off his own clothes is documented in coroner's records and forensic studies across every cold country on Earth. When the doctors and the searchers and the armies all write down the same strange truth independently, you can take it straight to the bank. You're probably wondering by now why nobody ever told you this plainly. Why it isn't common knowledge that you should stay still and stay dry and defend your core. And the answer is the same quiet answer it always is. It has nothing to do with any conspiracy. It's money and comfort. Survival knowledge stays alive only as long as people need it, and most people don't need it anymore. The heater in the truck, the furnace in the house, the phone in the pocket. The day a man could summon warmth with the turn of a dial, the knowing started to fade. Because nobody pays to remember a rule they think they'll never have to use. And then it got worse, the same way it always gets worse. Because the modern trade took the old truth and flipped it clean over and sold it back to you. Walk into any outdoor store and see what they're selling. They're selling you the coat as the answer. They're selling you the idea that warmth is a product, that you can buy your way safe, that the right jacket at the right price makes the cold a non-issue. Bigger, thicker, more expensive. They sell you the shell and never teach you the air. They sell you the gear and never the knowing. And so a man walks into 40 below, wrapped in $800 of the finest fabric, sweats through all of it in the first mile, because nobody ever taught him not to, and freezes just as dead as a man in wool, only more surprised. There's no money in telling you the fix is free, that it lives in how you move and how you breathe and how you keep yourself dry. There's endless money in selling you the coat. So they hand you, smiling, the exact opposite of the thing that keeps men alive. Let me be straight with you now, the way I'd want a man to be straight with me. Because I'd rather you trust me than be impressed by me. This is probably not going to happen to you. You're not likely to be stranded at 40 below this winter, not with your heated house and your car and your phone. To actually die of this, you'd have to be caught out and exposed and unprepared in real cold, with no quick way back to warmth, the way a stranded traveler or a man whose vehicle quit on a lonely road might be. I won't tell you it's coming for you. What I will tell you is that every man it ever took thought that exact same thing, right up until the door blew shut behind him or the engine wouldn't turn over. The cold doesn't announce itself. It just waits for the ordinary day to go a little wrong. So here's how you carry all of this, not as fear, but as a plain way of being. In the cold, defend your core and your neck first, and let your body's own logic bring the blood back to your hands. Understand that nothing you wear is warm, that all it does is trap still air, so dress in loose layers and manage them. Shedding before you sweat and closing up before you chill. Breathe through cloth and catch your own warmth. And when the trouble comes, fight the urge to thrash and run. Get out of the wind, get still, get insulated from the ground and the snow, and conserve what fuel you have. Above all, never trust the warmth. If you're out in real cold and a sweet, drowsy heat starts creeping over you, if the shivering stops and a calm sets in, and part of you wants to lie down and rest, that is the enemy at the gate, and you fight it with everything you've got left. None of that costs $1. That's the part I love most. The thing that saves your life is the knowing. And the knowing was free the whole time, sitting in the heads of the people who lived this cold long before any of us showed up with our catalogs and our credit cards. Maybe that's the real lesson, the one bigger than the cold. Those men didn't die because the cold was cruel, because the cold was only ever just the cold. They died because they trusted their own feelings over their own knowing. They trusted the numbness that felt like adjustment, the coping that felt like strength, and at the very end, the warmth that felt like mercy. The cold doesn't beat a man by overpowering him. It beats him by lying to him. And the man who survives is the one who decides ahead of time not to believe the lie, no matter how good it feels. The wilderness never kills the humble man half as fast as it kills the sure one. And the surest feeling of all is the warmth at the end. So tell me this down in the comments, and I mean the specific thing, not the general one. Has anyone in your own family ever been caught out in cold they didn't expect? And what did they do? Right or wrong? Because I want to hear it, and somebody reading might learn the thing that saves them from what your people learned the hard way. Next time I'm going to hand you another one from this same hard country, another rule that turns everything you've been told upside down. It's about water in the cold, and it runs dead against sense. The colder and thirstier you get out here, the more likely you are to reach for the one thing that'll drop your core temperature faster than the wind ever could. And I'll show you why eating snow to quench your thirst is one of the surest ways to freeze yourself from the inside out, along with what the old hands did instead. Until then, take care of your fire and don't ever trust the warmth that comes for free at the end of a cold you fought too hard.